you need to do is be more confident. Just be confident and you can achieve anything. Have faith. But what if your confidence has been knocked? What if you have an invisible disability? Or a chronic illness? Or you're neurodivergent? The same rules do not work. But in this video, I'm going to tell you how you can go from setbacks that knock your confidence to building your confidence back up again, even if you have barriers. I'm Dr. Becky Sage, and I have both autism and a chronic illness, both of which leave me burnt out, shut down, and tired. And it all gives my confidence a giant knock. So I'm going to break down a little bit what it means to be confident, why you might not be experiencing confidence, and a special framework that will help you build some of your confidence back. So what does it even mean to have confidence? Well, the word confidence actually derives from the word for trust. So confidence is all about trust, having trust in yourself in order to be able to deliver something. Now, oftentimes I see confidence getting conflated with self-worth and self-esteem. And whilst there is a connection between those three, they're not exactly the same thing. Self-worth is knowing that you are worthy. Just inherently, you are worthy to be loved, to have opportunities, to be able to work hard and create value in the world, to attract good people and good things around you. Just this idea that you are as inherently worthy as any other human being. Self-esteem is all about living to your values. So you will hold yourself in esteem if you show up in a way that you can be proud of. Confidence is all about you building trust in yourself to do particular things. That might be confidence in building relationships, it might be confidence in the workplace. The framework I have for you here actually works in any of those contexts, but for me, I mostly focus on my career. So if confidence is all about having trust in yourself, you've got to look at what might be stopping you from having trust in yourself. And for me, with an autoimmune condition, with autism, I've built up a lot of narratives in my head that tell me that I can't trust myself. What happens if I have a flare-up and I'm suddenly not physically able to show up for certain things? What happens if I get overwhelmed or overstimulated and I have to withdraw from an environment because I'm getting autistic shutdown or I'm worried that I'm going to have a meltdown? And over time, carrying these worries around have meant that I've built up this belief that I can't do things, that I don't trust myself. I noticed about 6 months ago that I'd lost confidence in pretty much every aspect of my life. I'd really started to build this narrative that I can't do things. I can't do things in the workplace. I can't have a full workload that I can deliver. I can't do gymnastics to the level I used to be able to do it. And a few things have happened that have proven to me that that's not actually true. So I've been working with this framework over the last 6 months, and recently I have developed new skills in gymnastics. I have been supported to put in a bid for a project with one of the world's most renowned scientific organizations. And I am getting asked to sit on boards, speak at different events because of my experiences and my expertise. I'm no different from the person I was 6 months ago, but 6 months ago that person would have believed that I can't do those things. I didn't trust myself. So what did I have to do to build that trust? Well, let's quickly break down the idea of trust. There is a trust equation, and broadly speaking, I like to think of it as trust, and this is whether you trust yourself or trust other people. Trust is whether somebody is reliable, whether they're credible, and whether they are motivated to achieve the goals or the plans that you have set out together to show up the way you want to set out. So when you're thinking about yourself, you're thinking, do I have the credibility to achieve my goals? Do I have the reliability to achieve my goals? And do I have the motivation to achieve those goals? Now, if you've got certain barriers that are holding you back, or you feel like they're holding you back, then that might decrease your motivation. Credibility-wise, you might see other people and think they don't have what I have. But both of those things can be changed with consistent work on something. Reliability, on the other hand, the ability to show up, is something that was a real challenge for me. Because I thought to myself, do you know what? I do know I have certain skills, certain expertise. I do know I actually want to show up and make a difference and make some changes. Don't always know exactly what those changes are I want to make, but I know I do. I know I'm motivated to do that. But do I think I can always be reliable? And with my mind and my body consistently playing tricks on me, sometimes I feel like I can't be reliable. So here are the things I've done to help build my own trust in myself and to show myself that I can be reliable enough, even if sometimes things do stand in my way. So first of all, I want to talk about some of the traps that you might fall into and some of the traps that I've fallen into myself. One is trying to do too many things. I've had a tendency to try to be good at everything, to prove that I can be good at everything. I think what's happened is where I felt like I am not achieving or not able to show up all the time, I then try and overcompensate, or I try and shift into a different area to prove that I can do those things. And what this has meant is that I'm very scatter in terms of the work that I'm doing. So one of the first things I needed to learn to do was deprioritize a whole bunch of stuff in order to prioritize and focus on the most important things. And actually for me, when I first started doing that, it was, what I'm going to do is show up once a week and do a YouTube video. Does it matter if anyone watches it? Not at this stage, no, because what I'm trying to prove to myself is that I can be reliable, that I can show up every week, even with challenges, and I can do this. Of course, over time, we want to make improvements. We do want people to watch and we want to make sure that we're adding a lot of value. But in the beginning, it's just about focusing on that one thing and deciding what that one thing is. You're trying to prove this to yourself, not to everybody else. Because guess what? You're probably your own biggest critic. And if you can prove something to yourself, the likelihood is everyone else will notice too. The other thing I had to prove to myself was that I can deliver things even if there are challenges that are going on. So for example, right now, and you may or may not realize this, but I'm very much struggling with a lot of pain in my shoulder, my neck, my back, and I've actually been in bed for the last 3 days. So for me, in the past, that would have meant, oh no, I can't do anything, I don't have time. But the reality is, at this point, I think I've made maybe 15, 20 YouTube videos over the last few months. And I've realized that, yes, I can't do the most snazzy ones. You're not going to see a lot of edits this week, but I can still show up. So that is one thing that I really had to prove to myself, was that even if there are these challenges that are going on, I can still make small changes. I can still do something. The other thing is about building up your stamina. There can be a tendency to tell yourself, I can't engage with people, I can't do social things, I can't do a whole day of work and then be okay. It's going to cause me to flare up, it's going to cause me to melt down, it's going to cause me to shut down, it's going to cause me to burn out. But actually you can build your stamina over time, and that's something that I've been able to prove to myself, and I hope by using the steps that I'm going to outline in a minute that you can do that with yourself too. Do let me know if these are the kind of challenges that you have as well, that if these are the kind of voices that you have in your head. Let me know I'm not alone in this. So as we get started, as we go into the steps, I want you to think about, what are you prioritizing? What's the most important thing for you? And what is it that you need to prove to yourself in order to start trusting yourself more? Once you've answered those questions, then we can jump in to the Trust You framework. Let's start with the T. Talk to yourself kindly. Before you do anything else, I want you to be noticing how you talk to yourself. If you're telling yourself, I can't, if you're telling yourself, I'm not good enough, if you're telling yourself all the reasons why something's going to go wrong, but not telling yourself the other things, all the reasons why something could go right, all the opportunities you might have, the goals that you have, then this is where you need to start. You need to start talking to yourself kindly. It's such an obvious but simple trick, but pretend you're talking to your best friend. I know you've probably heard that before. Or you're talking to somebody you really care about. How would you talk to them? Now, I get why you talk to yourself in that way. I do too. And it's because you've got this track record of, well, I did try to do something and then something went wrong. I ended up burnt out. I ended up in pain. I ended up really struggling. And it knocked my self-esteem. So maybe I do feel like I can't do something. I can't put myself out there. And we're going to come on to how we mitigate those risks in some of the other steps. But to start with, how are you talking to yourself? The other thing I do is I tell myself what a failure I am because I haven't hit X, Y, and Z goals already, and look at all the evidence that I can't achieve something. Let's start looking at all the evidence why you can achieve something. Where you are right now, that's one thing that you can't change, but you can change your perception of yourself and you can start moving in a new direction. So then once you're talking to yourself nicely, once you have started to create this vision for where you would like to build your life, and honestly, some of it might just be about being really happy with where you are. That's a lot of what I've had to do at this stage, talk to myself more nicely. And by doing that, I've started to understand, no, actually, you are in an okay place. And you want to build on that. There are things you need to shift, things you need to change. But they're not as crazy and as big as you thought they were. Which leads me on to the R, which is to set realistic goals. If you want to use the SMART framework, that's good too. SMART is specific, measurable, or some people have different letters for this, by the way, but specific, measurable, accountable, realistic, and time measured. And one of the things I know about myself and that I have experienced many times is I set these giant goals. And the truth is they're often not very realistic. Now, how can I reliably continue to show up if my goals are not realistic? I can't. So how can I prove to myself that I'm reliable if I create these massive visions instead of breaking them down into smaller goals? Now, what is my resistance to smaller goals? I often feel like they don't feel very meaningful. But right now, all we're trying to do is prove that you can show up for yourself. So make sure you're setting goals that lead you on the path to those bigger goals, but that are broken down enough to be realistic in terms of being able to achieve them. Don't worry at the moment about whether or not that's going to play into that bigger goal, because the bigger goals are ultimately going to come when you can build more confidence in yourself. Next step is to get ready to undertake the journey. You're going to do this by planning and start to create processes or habits that you're going to put into place. Now, this is all about looking at what that small goal is and what do you need to do in order to get to that small goal. When I talk about habits and processes, I think they're a lot more important than saying we've got this milestone, this milestone, this milestone, because it's these habits, it's these everyday things that are going to help lead you towards your goals. As an autistic person, process, routines are really, really helpful, but I do have to make sure that I have routines that are manageable for me. So you're going to look at how can you add in small things. And I think I really want to stress at this, don't go crazy. Make these initial goals, these initial habits, small things, and then allow them to spread. I definitely know that my issue is when I fill that diary too big, when I have too grand a goal, and then it doesn't happen. But if you start putting into place a process, so for example, I'm going to sit down and write something every Monday morning. That may or may not be something that's viable for you. You're not saying how much you're going to write, you're not saying what that milestone is going to be, and you might actually be surprised by what you can achieve in that period of time. Now, I am quite an achievement-driven person, so I do actually like to set myself those goals. And I think that's one of the reasons why I have struggled in the past when I'm struggling to achieve the goals, because I'm losing some of that motivation. So winding it back into something achievable is really important. And that starts with those day-to-day habits. Are they achievable? Is the process achievable? Is that plan to show up going to then lead you to your goals? So once you've decided on all that, you got to take action. So the next step is to step courageously into this next version of your life, into this next version of you. I do have an exercise that can help with all of these things, which I'll do in a later video, where you release this new version of yourself. But in every case, in order to make a shift, you have to go out of your comfort zone. it's not always about feeling totally comfortable. I know that we often put these protections on us because we know that if we push ourselves too hard, the consequences can be really big. But if you never take any step out of your comfort zone, then you're not going to be able to evolve, either as yourself or out there in the world in terms of hitting your goal. So there is some courage required. And courage is actually a really exciting thing. If you do something that makes you feel courageous, then you actually start to feel really good about yourself. Some may say you will start to feel a little bit of self-confidence. For me, that's shown up the most this summer in my gymnastics. And so every session I said, I'm going to do something that scares me a little bit. And by doing that, I had this overwhelming sense of achievement, and I achieved some skills that I have never done before. And for a work example, I decided I was going to go for this kind of big proposal that I've put together. And to do that, I had to ask for sign-off from certain people. I had to ask for references, and that was terrifying. But when I did it and those people gave references, it gave me a real boost. Now, I should say not everybody I spoke to did give me a reference or did help me out in this process. Some people were actually incredibly difficult, and it brought up some very difficult things. But ultimately, those who helped me were people who have been around for a really long time and have always been good people in my life. And that really restored a sense of self. Also, by going through the process and talking to new people, I've been invited to be on a steering group in a project that is really interesting to my career growth. Yes, it was scary. Yes, I was very worried. I almost just pulled out of doing this whole project because I was like, I don't know if I can deal with this right now. I don't know if I've got it in me. But I just kept going little step by little step and kept going with this process that I'm using right now. And I have finally submitted this proposal and had these good things happen out of the back of it. We're on the T at the end of trust now, is to treat yourself well. So one of the reasons I was able to keep going on this bid was because I still created space and nurture. When things were feeling like I was up against a wall, I walked away, I gave myself breaks, I did nurturing things. I spent time with nurturing people. And that stepping away and treating myself kindly was also really important in order to then be resilient throughout the rest of the process. So embarking on something, stepping courageously on a journey doesn't mean that you never ever stop and treat yourself well on that process. You need to, when you're building those habits, also make sure you're building habits in that are nurturing. And one thing I want to say there is check in again on the voices in your head. Are you still saying you can't? Are you still giving these negative voices in your head? Or have you managed to shift things? Because I know for me, those voices come back very, very easily. So I often have to give myself a talking to, and that's a way of treating myself well. Going back to doing my gratitude journal is also a way of treating myself well because it's shifting the way my brain works, doing some journaling. So continuing to treat yourself well. The next thing you're going to do in order to trust you is give yourself your regular check-ins. So you're going to spend most of your time focusing on these habits, these routines, these things that you've built in order to move towards your goals. But then you are going to, on whatever basis works for you, I do weekly check-ins and quarterly quests where you can sit down and talk to yourself and maybe ask a whole bunch of different questions about the progress that you're making and whether it's the right thing to do. Are you going in the right direction? Why not? If you are still struggling, why are you struggling? What's going on? For me, I've had a lot of anxiety across this summer, so I have managed to keep stepping forward, but it's been quite difficult at times. So I got to a point where I said, actually, I really need to start doing therapy because this anxiety is not going away. I've been to the GP, I've talked to them about medication. So even though I'm building confidence in myself, the anxiety can still be there. So there's lots of different things that are potentially going on here. Of course, the anxiety doesn't help in terms of building confidence. But if you show up for yourself, if you try and look for routes to help with that anxiety, then you are going to build more confidence in yourself to be able to take the steps. Those check-ins might be by yourself or they might be with other people. If you're watching here, you probably like to try and problem solve on your own and do things for yourself. But if you are autistic, then just by nature of the diagnosis, it means that you do need some kind of support. The truth is all humans need some kind of support. So you might want to find that there's some check-ins that you do with other people. Could be family, could be friends, or it could just be that you show up. I've also done it in a kind of parasocial kind of way and shown up and watched people's YouTube videos or joined certain memberships that have been helpful for making me check in. So it's kind of a light level of support. Next is O, and this is owning your successes. When we talk to ourselves in a negative way, it can be really, really hard to celebrate your milestones. But this is what it is that you need to do in order to keep going. You can do this in your weekly check-ins, but you might not necessarily notice things happening over time. But I want you to go back to why you need to build your confidence in the first place. What it is you're trying to do in terms of trusting yourself. Can you prove that you can show up? Can you be pleased with yourself for talking to yourself better or for nurturing yourself? Can you be pleased with yourself for showing up on a certain number of days? When you have challenges, these things can be really hard to do. So it's so important to tell yourself you're doing a good job. I like to do this through intrinsic rewards, so really taking note and again, talking to yourself in a nice way. You might want to give yourself some extrinsic rewards here. So you could buy yourself something nice to celebrate something. You could go for a walk. But I don't really like tying those things together with my workplace achievements, because I think that workplace achievements are rewards in themselves. And you actually, if you only give yourself some of those extrinsic things when you're doing really well in work, I think that that actually adds to the problem. But perhaps for you that works. Let me know in the comments. And then the final thing you're going to do is allow things to unfold, and you're going to adjust as you go. So I think sometimes when we start something new, that new thing can be really exciting, but we don't really give it time to unfold. We have one small challenge and then it feels like nothing's working and we just go back to square one. It's really important to give yourself time for things to shift and change. As you're doing your weekly and your monthly or quarterly review, you can then look to make adjustments. I wouldn't make loads of shifts because all you're going to do is bounce around, and this is again something that I definitely have done in the past. I want you to find some steadiness, some stability, so that you can trust that you can hit a goal. But if things don't feel right, if they're not really working, if the habits that you're building aren't really the right habit, if they're not working, if you're still coming up against other challenges, then you can see what's unfolding and allow yourself to adjust those things. So that is the Trust You framework. I'd like to know in the comments if you've tried something like this before, or if you don't think any of these steps are going to work for you and why they might not work for you. Confidence is something that ebbs and flows, and it is circumstantial. But I know that if you are struggling with your own confidence in your own self, that breaking it down, taking it step by step, and really watching the way you speak to yourself is going to be helpful. Having more confidence doesn't mean that everything is perfect. It just means that you feel like you've got more safety, more security, because you can trust you. I hope you're doing well, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Bye.